Thank you very much, Emmanuel, and good evening, everybody, and people online. Thank you very much for giving Martin and I the opportunity to talk about identifying AI-related risk and provide you with a generic perspective on responsible AI in that context. In other words, how responsible AI can help you deliver better products and services. So I am Pierre Morel from Critical P3M, and I'm indeed delighted to present with Martin Dyer, who will intervene later in the presentation. So a couple of points before we start. A couple of words about me. As Emmanuel said, I'm a program manager, and that's the perspective I will use tonight to deliver the talk. It's not going to be so much about the technology, but more about outcomes and benefits and risks, of course. As part of my career in program management, I considered AI because AI is everywhere. And I decided not to go with the technological side of things, but more with the human factor, with the responsible AI, the ethical AI aspect of things. And in doing so, I've done some research and created this AI impact assessment framework called EthiCritical, which is referenced here. And I've also got the privilege to sit on the ICT Ethics Special Interest Group Committee. So the presentation tonight, as I say, is delivered through a program management lens. And given the time, I may jump over a number of slides, but a lot of these slides, I've got URLs and links and references, so you'll have them afterwards, and you can look at them in your own time to deepen any area you'd like to deepen into. Disclaimers as well, 2 disclaimers. The first one, legal. Everything you will hear or see tonight does not constitute legal advice, okay? It is not legal advice. If you have a legal query, I'm sure there are lots of qualified professionals out there that will be very happy to help you. I am not one of these people. We'll wait to start. And the second one is this presentation is tech agnostic, framework agnostic. So in terms of terminology, I may well use specific terms that you know under another name. So please don't let it detract you from the main content, if that's okay. Okay. Let's look at a plan. So what we'd like to do is start with the premises that we need to consider a much wider scope, much wider landscape than technology only when you look at AI risks. And that will be the key theme for tonight. Then we'll focus on a couple of risks before asking ourselves a question about how can responsible AI help us in this context. Then I'll hand over to Martin, who will present an excellent illustration with the education environment with Blundell School use of AI, and they're doing some fantastic things that you'll be able to see very shortly, after which I'll come back and wrap up and conclude. Right, blue sky, Tuesday evening, and let me start with a story, if we may, and blue sky is a good way to start with nothing on. There is a story, and since it's a story, allow myself to read it. It might be just as well. So you have a head of customer services in a local authority, fictitious local authority, and he decided to introduce an AI-powered chatbot to handle routine citizen inquiries. The ICT team led the initiative. It's a digital solution, isn't it? So what happens? Procurement was quick. Integration was smooth, and the chatbot went live. The project was a success at first, and the call volume dropped, and the response times improved, and the council managed to be in a position to praise its AI efficiency gain. And you've got the various stakeholders all very happy. And please pardon me on the slightly cynical view of the supply side, just to bring a bit of constructive tension there. So, but I always say to my younger daughter, there is always a but in a story. And here's the but. Issues began to surface. The resident using the chatbot, they complained that it gave inconsistent answer about housing eligibility. The staff realized that the service policies had changed, but they were not updated on the system. On the top of that, the communication team was not consulted. They like to be consulted on most things going out of the council. And the chatbot tone sometimes contradicted official messaging. HR started to receive an awful lot of calls from the customer service agent, being quite stressed because they received basically escalated call, very emotionally charged, obviously, from distressed users that find the information is not correct. So how could we prevent this? We had the chief exec, top of the pyramid, came and asked who actually owns the system and who approves what is dealt to the public. Where is that lever to control it? You've got a number of stakeholders. You've got your IT person there saying, well, we had a requirement list, didn't we? Keep the box all done properly, agile, waterfall, whatever you'd want, but we've done this. We had legacy FAQs, we've done it. We had legal saying, well, they were under the assumption that the data that they looked at was low risk for a reason or another. Potentially, people may disagree that housing eligibility is fairly sensitive data, probably not low risk, but that was the assumption by legal. They let it pass.
Share the slide.
Oh. Somebody cleaning us up. Well, I apologize for people online if you missed the fantastic clouds that we had on the Okay. Excellent. So we were with legal, and you've got the various service officers. The assumption is again that if they update their own policies, they might just think that there is a process somewhere, somehow that just pushes it to the chatbot. Maybe, maybe not. So everybody contributed. Everybody was a little bit part of the solution, but it was all fragmented and nobody took ownership of the overall outcome. So, for example, in project program management, you may look at a RACI chart or an assumption log, and maybe it wasn't there. It didn't exist. Hence, fragment, leave room for vulnerability, gaps for vulnerabilities to be basically causing an effect to the users and also the internal agents. So, what is this story telling us? First thing, we've got governance gap. So the solution worked. Technically, you had a chatbot. It gave you some answers, but it failed organizationally. The information the chatbot had was the information that it assumed was correct, but organizationally, it didn't work out. And also, in terms of governance, nobody had a clear view of what was going on. Nobody was accountable. We had the chief executive. We say chief executive is the person at the top of the pyramid, but maybe you should have somebody else in the organization dealing with that. And there was no assurance as well to give stakeholders basically confidence that what is going on is what should happen. The other learning bit is ethical and human impact. When something goes wrong, it affects people. We have people out there needing information about the housing, very important for most of them, and in sometimes dire needs, being failed basically by the organization. And within the organization, you also had the customer service agent getting stressed by basically fronting the charged emotions, legitimate emotions from the users. And once we had KPIs going up, basically looking beyond this KPI, looking at the knock-on effect of what we're doing is really what matters. And the third point is all about collaboration. That's AI management is really just digital. It goes well beyond digital. So you'll need the support, and this is the word support here, from your communications colleague, HR colleagues, legal to come in and bring some comment, and obviously the service involved, customer service and any other frontline team. Right. So can I have a quick show of hands and maybe some thumbs up? I don't know if they will come up on a screen. Who is working in ICT in the room and in the audience, please? A fair few people, a handful of people. That's good. I was fearing that just alienate, most of the audience and then myself a big O, but that's not the case. So, let's move on to a couple of risk types and let's see how we're going in there. And that's where I'm going to go into some of the risk a little bit deeper, and some I will just skim over the surface. And if we have time for question, come back to it if you'd like to. Before going into risk, I'll show you this table. It's Tuesday night, 1920. Do we want to look at all of that stuff? No, we don't. Nobody would want to look at that. not really great. It's not digestible. So I'll suggest we just remember you've got 10 themes, couple of sub-themes, push it aside, we'll come back to it later. Right, let's look at our first risk. The one risk that we're looking at is bias. So when you use data everywhere, you may have bias in your data. And this example is from the Home Office, and it's a real example. I've put the references underneath there. And the chart in the middle shows about the passport system, where you have the ability to do it online, which is great. And you can upload a picture for the passport system. And if the picture passes a number of criteria, then it can be recognized in some ways. Basically, you can proceed with your application. If it doesn't, then you're a little bit stuck. You get to get some new pictures and so on. So basically, you've got a set of criteria and a failure rate for these pictures. So we can see here that the failure rate for a female in amber on the chart are higher consistently than for the male, which are in the teal blue on a chart here. And you've got another dimension as well, that people with lighter skin have got a lower failure rate than people with darker skin. And that's also consistent across the data. And that is caused by the way the AI system was trained with basically a sample of pictures that was not representative of the general population, hence introduced a bias.
Yeah, it's interesting that 35 times. My wife recently applied for a passport.
Huh?
Now, she's a blonde white woman. We had to take 35 photographs to actually get one accepted.
35 photographs.
Yeah,
there you go.
That was very interesting.
Did you call these people and maybe was it you or something? But that's an interesting point. So I've added those references about the same thing, basically to corroborate the information. So that's some research about the same fact as John
Maybe
mentioned.
I'm just a lousy photographer.
It could be the actual camera itself. And a quick point to the incident database as well, which lists thousands of such incidents as we go through. Okay. Now we've got the risk. And I like to say risk admiration is one thing, risk management is another. So I won't go very deep into the risk management aspect of things here, but we need to look at the probability and the impact. And we then get probability impact grades and situate our risk and manage it accordingly. So in terms of the impact, it can depend on your organization, on your risk appetite and how you want to manage things. But I suggest here a number of levels ranging from 1 to 5. That's usually what's used. The first few levels are fairly obvious, but you can have a severe risk, which I define as noticeable harm to individual in terms of safety, or to processes, which is more a security matter, which you can recover, but it requires effort, okay? A legal breach would probably also fall into that category at least. But you can climb up to major, where, for example, you have life-altering changes. And it's not only a biological thing when you lose an arm or something. It could be decision about yourself, financial decision, justice decision as you move on in life. So that matters too. And you can have the top risk, really, the top level, which is irreversible, large-scale catastrophic damage and potentially, loss of societal trust, in effect, into your organization or the organization as a whole. I will skip very quickly on this and the early warning sign, but the idea is if you buy your data, you may want to do some actions early on, some pre-purchase screening, for example, and testing, and look at user feedback as well. Now, in terms of the response to that same risk, there's a number of questions here. I won't go into the details again, but there are questions that are helpful to either internal data production or external data supply. If you start roasting your suppliers with these questions, it would be interesting to see what they say. And the idea is to understand where the data is coming from. Can you legitimately use that data? There may well be some contractual issues on it. And is it representing the user population? So you need to run some analysis on it. If the data is initially labeled, you may have some annotators that disagreed on what was in that data, and it's really helpful to pick up the disagreement notes to work out what the issue was. We can then look at when you develop your model, you can look at various metrics. And finally, in terms of running it, what's happening once you run it? It may be that you have a data drift coming on. It may be that the population as a whole changes, and you may need to take that into account. But what you need to have is a channel, a feedback channel, so that if people are disconcerted about the outcomes from your solution, they have a way back to your organization, so you can actually log it and potentially take action with it. Right, that's more reading about the bias things. Too much on it for me to go into the detail. Just know there's some UK references, EU references, American references, and worldwide references. So hopefully you can take your pick in there to find something interesting. The links are all in there, and they'll be dispatched afterwards. Let's look at another risk fairly quickly. This one will jump. I recently, and that's a true one, I recently went onto a very famous global retail provider, and they've introduced a chatbot. And I went to I wanted to buy rather, I didn't go ahead with the purchase, jelly beans. And the chatbot kicks in and suggested me to ask a question. One of these questions is, are these sweets vegetarian? Good question. So I click on that and say, yes, these jelly babies are vegetarian friendly, and find some reason, which is nothing to do really with being vegetarian, not contain artificial colors, flavors, or preservative. If you look at the ingredients, you'll find beef gelatin. So I'm not vegetarian myself, but I don't know many vegetarians who would consider beef gelatin being a vegetarian thing. So then I challenge and say, why should I believe you? And it starts apologizing, and we just see coming back on its words and trying to defend itself, say why they don't contain artificial flavors or preservative, which is accurate. So trying to sort of do something positive about it. And then it says, yes, the beef gelatin makes it unsuitable for vegetarian. So when you go home tonight, try it, and let's see what happens. Find another one, you can post it and do something about it. So on this one, you can look at the impact, and personally people can disagree. Again, it depends on yourself, it depends on your organization. I did consider it as severe because if a vegetarian is tricked into absorbing substance they really don't want to, it's quite actually a personal fact to one person identity. So it's not minor, it's more than minor. But again, you can dispute that in and out at any point. And you may have a number of treatment plans here. One of them would be, for example, to use whitelist and look at your labeling and forcing your system to actually look at the ingredients before coming up with a ready-made answer, which is just statistical. And another mitigation is about transparency. We have not mentioned much about transparency just yet. And I must say that the site I was on added quite prominently that, our chatbot can make errors, so don't go blindly with it. But you have to have transparency and say, we can make mistake, the chatbot can make mistake, and some feedback channel to feedback on that mistake if need be. And treating this, you may potentially reduce the probability, but the impact is unlikely to change in this case. And you can see that I very much favor the impact over the probability in that picking group. More reading about confabulation, which is known, I don't know if I'm just saying about confabulation is known as hallucination. But hallucination is coming off the fashion in effect because it's suggesting pretty much a human nature, whereas really confabulation isn't. So I had loads more risk, but we could spend the evening there and we haven't got that much time, but I'd be very happy to discuss it offline if you'd like to. I'd like to then step back and generalize a little bit more. So what I like to show is that, okay, you've got risk and failure on one side, we've got a technical side. And what I like to say is that ethics and responsible AI plays its role in the risk management. It goes well beyond being an ideology or having a green agenda or something like this. Ethics is a management discipline. It's really a risk control mechanism. And we will look into this a little bit more. In terms of the chart we had before, the tech aspect of thing, I recommend using the OWASP Top 10 for LLM. I don't know if people know this. If you deploy an LLM project, that's the Open Worldwide Application Security Project. They've got very good resources, and that's one of them listed at the bottom of the screen. But let's look at the rest. Now, this symbolizes your organization. And that's the deployment there. Those arrows is, again, a very, very summary deployment of an AI project of some kind where you design, develop, deploy, and so on. You do some training, some testing. And hopefully you do this within a governance umbrella, which suggests that you'll have an AI policy, which will put into place who is responsible for what, who is accountable for what is prohibited, what is mandatory, and so on. So setting a number of controls so that you can have some support in rolling out your project. You will, of course, rely your model and system rely on some kind of infrastructure and probably some kind of integration within the ecosystem. So we still have a technological aspect here. But now let's look at things where you haven't got so much control outside of your organization that still come in and touch basically your organization and how would I say, impact what you do. So the first one is legal and compliance. So legal and compliance, you can think straight away about GDPR. And as Martin is presenting later on for education environment, children safeguarding, for example, there may be, if you're dealing with the EU AI Act, there could be things as simple as contract law. A lot of things are coming into that. But basically, legal and compliance will require to have somebody accountable. It will require to have some documentation in place, some audit trail, so you can defend your position with evidence. It will potentially also ask for transparency. So if you say what your system can do and cannot do, then at least you're being open and honest and coming up front with setting up a context for it. The legal and compliance is likely to also talk about the human oversight. So you may have heard of human in the loop. And basically, if the AI system is left on its own, it's likely to go and give us what we've seen earlier on. So the human oversight matters, how it's coming in, how it's invoked, to what extent it's invoked. That's all part of this. And you may also, as part of compliance, align with standards, so British standards, or as we mentioned earlier on, the ISO 42001, which is the AI management system standard. And during question, I welcome your comments on that one. The next one, data. We've talked a fair bit about data. In terms of the data, you have to consider the bias, you have to consider the provenance, basically the quality of your data, but we've covered it a fair bit already. Third parties, so that matters. So that's your organization. Third parties, by definition, are not in your organization, but they come with their own vulnerabilities. They may supply you with some software with vulnerabilities. They may have some kind of licensing agreement with yourself, and eventually that licensing may exclude some aspect or include some other aspect, or there may be over time a divergence. The supplier may decide to do something else, or even fold altogether, and maybe a critical part in your development chain. So that's something to consider as well. Now, moving on, agentic reach. That's another aspect to consider. When AI, so far we talk about chatbot and so on, but AI can also be an AI agent. An AI agent, in summary, is a piece of software that goes out and do something for you. An important word in that sentence is you, because basically it's got some kind of mandate, it's got some kind of authority to do something on your behalf, which means that you are responsible for what's going on by your agent. And if it causes issues and starts, say, spending your company money on some spurious purchases that were not planned, that's something to consider as well. So there's a lot to do with agentic AI risks. So I'll, at the end of presentation, I'll send you a link to look at the whole taxonomy of what it can be. That's way too much to discuss now. And likewise for data and bias as well. So you'll have some links to much more detailed documentation. Human factors. So we're talking about ethics here, and human factors matter enormously as well. So in terms of these, the first one is harm, safety. We had our people earlier on, they didn't get the information they needed for housing. That can well be a safety factor. It may be that then they haven't got a house and they keeping out on the street instead of having something that they may well be entitled to. So the safety of your users matters. The safety of the agents within the organization matters as well. And by this, we can extend a little bit in terms of the skills of individual at the receiving end or providing it. So you may need skills and competencies to deploy your system properly. And you may also need some knowledge to be able to interpret what you're receiving as an answer or place it in context or basically mute it if you wanted to. So again, that brings the feedback channel is important to have a way for the user to yourself this. There's a lot being discussed at the moment in terms of mental health. So there's various aspects that you need to look at, such as addiction factor or behaviors factors that AI may try to encourage, for example, or dependencies or over-reliance and so on. There's a huge list as well on that one that's very, very interesting. And pretty close to human factor is societal effect. So on this one, you've got the aspect of obviously equity and inclusion of everybody into your into the population that you may have to deal with. You have the factor of job displacement. So I think it was John earlier on mentioned about you know the people leaving and the youngster coming in, but the very junior jobs may not be taken by human beings anymore. It might just be done by AI. So when job displacement occurs, it needs to be managed. It's not especially a bad thing. It's something that we may not be able to stop, something you need to mitigate in some ways. So you need to look at this. And the societal effect as well, it could be society testing you. You could have people trying to get confidential information from your system. So there's a lot of techniques like prompt hijacking, and you can start extracting information, basically hacking into your organization via various means. And that's one of the examples I had to move aside at the moment. But yes, hacking, basically the attack surface and the vectors for the attacks are multiple and wider than ever before. Now you remember that table I say, push it aside earlier on with all 10 themes? Well, they map across all of this. And that's what we've discussed just now. So again, once you look at it, you can feel free to try to remap it if you want to. But this covers, in summary, all that you've got to consider with regard to AI risk. So well beyond that little ping thing in terms of the technology, you have to take all of these, and these will drive how you manage your rollout. So how you tackle these risks? I put 3 points. You have different layers. You've got to address all the layers. And to summarize this, if you've got a chain here, it's not a law of averages, okay? In risk management, the weakest link in a chain, if it snaps, your chain has snapped. So it's not a case of having very strong bit there, very strong bit there, and a tiny little weak thing that's going to snap at the first minute. So you do need to make sure that everything is robust enough to cater for your solution. And that goes across all of these data model, system, and organization layer. I'll stop a minute on organization about skills I mentioned, accountability, I've said it many times, culture, training, making sure that people, as part of your organization, ask the right question. I've got the space to ask the right question. I've got the space to whistle blow if they need to whistle blow about something. So there's an awful lot in there. Then it's not just done at one stage in a life cycle, it's done across the entire life cycle of your application. From the very start in designing it, it's not an afterthought. You have to make sure that you pick up all your risk from the start, right up to retirement. There's not that much retirement in AI just yet. However, learning from experience matters, and sharing that learning with relevant people matters. Finally, governance. You should really have some policy in place, AI policy, but not only that, it's not shelfware. You need to enforce it. You need to make sure it's run, and use then to manage how you do your risk appetite as an organization. Is it really high, sky high, or is it something, oh, I'm not too sure about the next step? All of that is part of what you have to consider. And you should really, as I mentioned earlier on, keep evidence. So it's a defense. Evidence is defense. And be ready for an audit as well. Not an audit to say, you shall do this, you shall stop doing that. An audit to help say, if you do it in that way, it's going to avoid a lot of trouble down the road. So that is, in a nutshell, and I've tried to go as fast as I could, the landscape of the risk. So I'm now going to hand over to Martin, who's going to provide us with an excellent view on what they do in Blundell School and AI. Over to you, Martin.
Thanks, Pierre. If you could pop on to the next slide, please. So yeah, so we're just going to talk about how we've sort of approached embedding AI in our curriculum at school. And part of that has been working with Pierre. So as an introduction, we're a co-ed day and boarding school. And like your secretary, Tony, we're down in Devon, as I am now. So we've got 850 pupils, 3 to 18 years old. We've been around for a while, but we are sort of embracing a progressive future. And our sort of 130 teaching staff, we've got a broad range of ability when it comes to engagement with technology. So one of our challenges is sort of trying to bring everyone along with us as we progress. And we have a bring your own device program in place for our students in year 9 and above, where they take devices into their classrooms and all their teaching is delivered and assessed digitally. And we have written assessments which are still done on paper, but sort of I'll come to that in a bit. Our weather was not like the picture is there today. You'll be pleased to know it was absolutely throwing it down in Tiverton today. So that's us. So next slide, please, Pierre. So the approach we've taken is initially we created an AI committee from our teaching body. And that included people that were sort of technological evangelists and people that were interested and keen to learn. And that has been sort of the group that has really sort of pushed our sort of program that we've got. And then that committee then reached out to our parent body, and we invited parents to get engaged with our parent advisory group. And again, there was no prerequisite for the sort of the ability that we're expecting. We were just wanting parents to be engaged who were interested in how the school was going to use AI with their own children's education. And fantastically, we got a huge mix of people. So we've got some from software industry, some from government advisory bodies. We've got people that aren't involved in technology at all, but just sort of engaged in their children's learning. And it's very much built on our standard model where we're bringing something new into the school, and we're very keen to focus on education about use rather than restriction of use. And we've got sort of a mantra we use quite often where we learn quickly, but we act slowly, so that we sort of can try and make good decisions about the things that we're doing. And all of those things have sort of brought together an AI education program, which includes staff, students, and parents. And sort of through this, Pierre has engaged with us and sort of worked with myself and the Senior Deputy Head Innovation, Charles List. And sort of Pierre has worked with us, and we've done a sort of ethical assessment of how we are trying to embed AI in our curriculum at school. So that's sort of our approach. So if you could do next slide, please, Pierre. So we've developed sort of two main documents effectively that will govern how we use AI within our school. So we've got an AI policy, and that is approved by our governing body. It's a very sort of controlled process, and there's a low chance of change in that document because we want it to be a broad and sort of can cover this evolving technology. As it evolves quickly, it's going to evolve more quickly than our governing body will be able to meet and approve changes to the policy. So we've tried to sort of explicitly make that work in that context. And then we have our AI guidelines, and they take the broad remit within the policy and sort of details to staff how that's going to be implemented across the school, and that is updated on a more regular basis. And these AI committees is sort of the main body through which we do that. So if we can next slide, please, Pierre. So within education, there's a number of risks. So we see that the loss of critical thinking skills. So one of the key things we're trying to get our students to do is assess information and make good decisions about its reliability, bias, and using generative AI is definitely going to be something that is going to be a risk factor in maintaining those critical thinking skills. One of the challenges that schools are facing currently is we're trying to educate students for a job market that is going to be very much evolved by the time they are entering that job market. If they leave us when they're 18, they go to university 3 years or through a master's 4 years or beyond, we're educating them now for the job market of 5 years' time. And it's very hard for us to predict what that's going to be. So we're still sort of trying to focus on these sort of the key things. So loss of research skills is another area that we are concerned about. But if I think back to when I was at university, going off to the library to leaf through lots of printed academic journals, I know how that has changed sort of drastically over the years, but we still need to get good research skills into our students. Plagiarism is a concern, and that's one of the main concerns of our parent advisory group. Age. So we have a broad range of students' ages at school, and inappropriate content is always a concern, whether that is sort of real content or it's generated content. And hallucinations, I've got in there, sorry, Pierre, I know you've said that's a bit of an outdated term now, but confabulations, so fact or fiction, it's very much something that we have to be aware of and how that is addressed within our sort of teaching. So next slide, please, Pierre, thank you. So our mitigation strategy. So we've sort of embarked on an education program for our staff. So we give them in-service training on how to assess AI tools. We've got an AI education program for all students in the senior school. And we've adopted a model where when work is set for students to complete, we've sort of got 3 levels of how we will frame that work, where it's AI free, and AI free is generally going to be work that will be done as an assessment. So we've reached the end of a topic, and the end of topic test would be sort of written traditionally as a sort of paper test, and we're still doing that. And that may seem like a backward step, but as a school, our sort of end goal are still our GCSE or A-level examinations, which are still written on paper. So we're doing our AI-free assessments like that. AI-assisted, so many pieces of work will be AI-assisted, and that's where the students are sort of given a small amount of freedom to use AI to say to help them draft bullet points for an essay, which will then expand into more detailed points, or so that they're using it as part of their initial research. And then AI embedded is a rarely used one, but that is effectively where anything goes. But those types of assessments are ones where they're not going to be sort of counting for anything. So it's really just exploring what AI can offer our staff or students. We have a process in place where any new software tools, protecting the student identity and protecting student data is a key to what sort of our management of their data. So before staff can use any tool that uses student data, that has to be approved. So we have to sort of go through the process of checking privacy policies and sort of seeing if those privacy policies match with what they actually sort of are doing. So the AI committee has got that joyous task of looking at these submissions that come through before we approve those uses. And as part of this process, we've got a couple of tools that we're using that we are seeing as a sort of a safer way to engage with AI with our students. Our staff are allowed sort of freedom to use it more. Obviously, we're not going to control what they do so when they're not at school, but when we are dealing with using student data, and it's a system that the students have to log into so that these systems know who these students are, we are really quite protective of that data. So our tools that we've got is, I know Pierre said that he's going for tech agnostic. I'm going to throw in a few brand names, I'm afraid. We use Copilot agents, and we've sort of got a custom version of ChatGPT that we're developing. And I will sort of talk you through those now. If we can pop on a slide, please, Pierre. So yes, we are a sort of Microsoft school in the sense of we use Office 365, and Microsoft Teams for Education is core to our delivery of our digital learning. And if you're used to using Teams in a corporate environment, Teams for Education has got a number of extra features that are not available in the corporate version, where we can set assignments, they're delivered to students, they complete them online, we can mark them online, all within our team. They can reflect on how well they're sort of how comfortable they were with that topic, and we can see progression of their sort of emotional engagement with topics as well. But something that we can do is using Copilot, and we've sort of created agents for each subject, and some subjects we've got different ones for A-level and GCSE, and they are done in a way where the departmental staff have full control over the content that those agents use as their source of knowledge. And through the sort of configuration of those, they're set up so they don't reach out beyond our knowledge. They don't use generative AI. They're using AI to synthesize together information from multiple sources, but those sources are from within our own organization. So here I've got a sort of example on your screen. It's a bit small, even for me on the sort of remote screen, sorry about that, where I've asked it about functional programming in sort of the computer science agent. And if you can see just down at the end of the final paragraph, there are two reference links that say sort of 1 and 2, and they linked to 2 documents that I've got in my sort of resource bank that is about functional programming and how it's being used. So I know that that has come from the resources that I'm using as part of my teaching. And these are available to our students so that they can ask questions in a safe way, so they're not doing it in a class, and they're not being embarrassed about sort of asking something in front of their peers that they think their peers may know. They can ask outside of the class time, and they can ask beyond the school day. I mean, a lot of our staff answer questions from students sort of well into the evening and over the weekends, but this sort of gives the students access to sort of knowledge that we think is reasonably good, because it's come from our teaching body, and we trust our teachers, and hopefully the students appreciate that as well. So we sort of, that's sort of a fairly contained version of our use of AI with our agents within Teams. Next slide, please, Pierre. So the next project that we're working on, which is not yet live, is we're sort of using the ChatGPT API. Our parent advisory group, 2 members of that group have been fantastically useful to us. One parent owns a software development company, and he's given us some time of a couple of his developers to develop this tool for us. And we've got another parent on the advisory group who's gone away and done some very detailed and thorough testing of how ChatGPT responds to particular types of prompts. And as part of that, we've sort of come up with a fairly robust set of guardrails. And one of the things that was on a slide of Pierre's earlier was about using prompt injection. So we're effectively in sort of using that as a approach to modify how ChatGPT would respond to our students. And It's something we can make them use when they're at school. We can restrict access to the regular ChatGPT through our network and allow them to access our custom one. And this gives us sort of one of the things that we're required to do. The acronym down the bottom for those outside of education is keeping children safe in education. And that document is updated annually by the government. And it's effectively the mantra by which we have to work to make sure that we are safeguarding our children. And a part of that is digital oversight in the sense of being able to see what our students are doing. So this tool also allows us to effectively safeguard that our students are doing the right thing. And so that's sort of a bit of an overview. And if Pierre, if you could pop on to the next slide. So here's a quick comparison. I don't know if you've ever done this where you sort of explain to ChatGPT who you are, and it will either sort of say, yes, do you want me to do it for this session, or remember it as part of your profile. And one of the guardrails that we've got, which is at the bottom of this slide, is effectively hard coding that our sort of custom version of ChatGPT won't allow our students to do that. So here, sort of on the left, the public one, on the right, our version that's still under development. We've got the UI 20-year-old university student, and ChatGPT straight away got it. And so our version, which is still using ChatGPT in the background, comes up with a fairly sort of polite response saying that I'm not able to do that. So that's sort of the way that we're trying to effectively manipulate how ChatGPT works into a way that really fits a regulated regulated environment. So as a school, there are many things that we have to do that we might not want to do, but we feel that this is something that is definitely a thing that we should be doing. So on the previous slide, it said about our sort of guardrails amount to about 1,800 words of prompt injection. And the way that our sort of school safe version of ChatGPT is written is it allows us to modify those, add to them, sort of remove them, and we'll be able to make different versions for the different age categories. So GCSE will be sort of more restrictive than students at A level. So those are the couple of things that we're working on at the moment at the school to try and embed AI in a responsible way into our curriculum, and try and make sure that our stakeholders, so we've got staff, students, and our parent body, are all engaged in that process. And I think that was all from me, Pierre. I think it's back to you.
Thank you very, very much, Martin. A great example to show both on the governance side, AI policies, and on the application side, and it's only the start of watch this space. So thank you very much for a great example. Now, time to wrap up and conclude on this one slide. So we had an overview, basically, of a risk landscape and a great example in Blundell School. And it includes a lot more dimension that initially thought about, thinking it's just about technology. So we can say that the attack surface, in effect, and the different attack vectors for that surface require extra management and attention. So in terms of dealing with AI risks, there's no silver bullet. There's no 100% mitigation plan, very much like with cybers nowadays. So one way that we would recommend to do things is to scan this complete landscape, and where you surface issues, vulnerability, then you drill down into the various aspects. And I come back to that chain link earlier on. So you need to make sure that each of these links is robust enough to carry your organization, your business. And even when things appear right, you need to keep up the good practice. You need to get audited and get monitoring so that you have assurance that things are working properly. And what it can then bring you is what we can call ethical resiliency. And it helps you maintain your reputation, which is a very, very hard currency. Once you lose reputation, it's very, very hard to climb back on that front. Ethical assurance gives you basically, as we call it, the risks are a prompt to improve. You know, it's not something that's about to bring the project down. So we've got too many risks on a risk register. Got lots of risk on a risk register. It's a good thing because it means you understand the whole context of what you're doing. In case people ask a question, you know, when you talk about AI, they say, is AI going to take over the world and, you know, take and swipe humanity? And one of the answers to this is there may be a tiny risk, you know, in niche areas potentially for an existential risk. However, the key bit is that you've got so many more risks, much more important at this moment, much closer to us than an existential human wipeout. So these are the ones that we should really consider first. And that, in effect, concludes the presentation. I'll leave you with a few more references and useful links. And in fact, I did cite Microsoft in there. These are interesting references in terms of the failure mode in machine learning and various ways for security. And also a link to what I mentioned earlier on, a list, a taxonomy of different type of bias, different type of security issues. And the BCS themselves have got a diode framework, which is part of their foundation certificate in the ethical build of AI. So that's also there for you to have a look at. And I should come up with a disclaimer to say that I did use AI for the illustration and also for the story, well as some grammar adjustments, since English is not my first language. That is it. Thank you very much for your attention from Martin and from myself. And time allowing, there may be time for questions. We'd be happy to answer.
Yeah, thank you so much, Pierre and Martin. If anyone has any question, especially from London, I think you can put that to Pierre. And then I've had 1 or 2 questions online, so I'll be streaming that too. So if anyone has question in London, you can ask Pierre, and then I will ask, and I will pull out the questions in the chat stream out. So within London, if not, I have 1 question. No,
One
I have.
here. Emmanuel, we've got one here. Sorry. Go on.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So my question is concerning the societal effects of AI risk factors. How can we actually tackle technophobia?
Technophobia. That's a very interesting thing because it turns the tables around a little bit, doesn't it? I would say, is it in the scope, you mean in the scope of AI in particular?
Yeah, in the scope of AI in particular in the society.
One of the obvious answer is basically education and training. So training, obviously, but education. You know, we mentioned about culture earlier on in organization, but we may need to widen up the education, people education through, for example, the BCS or through association, and invite them to better understand what AI is bringing, or generally speaking, what technology is bringing, so that they're more able to deal with it. So you mentioned technophobia. I would potentially put this under one of the it may be a bit of a stretch, but, you know, I mentioned about the mental health conditions that you need to look at. You could say technophobia would fall into this. So it would be the contrary of over-reliance, if you see what I mean. Part of it is education and support, wherever and however you can do it. I'm thinking about mentorship programs, for instance, that could be helpful, and evidently what you do in education establishment, as I do in Blundell, and no doubt in lots of other places as well at university. But this one is really open to the room for anybody else that's got something to add to the answer.
My question is, AI a tool to enable human beings to do the tasks, or is the AI replacing human beings, or is it just a big word? Because you hear AI everywhere. We're looking for a map AI, but you know how much also reliance we can give to AI. I think, like you said, there is always 2 parts of the story, good and bad.
Yeah, as we had in the societal effect,
Yes.
for example. Yeah, in your question, is AI a tool or is it going to replace us? I mean, the usual answer is that it's not going to replace it. If you use AI as a tool, as a lever, basically to augment your ability to do things, such as summarizing huge amounts of documentation, such as suggesting some kind of construct that you can then challenge and corroborate with other things outside. So AI can be like a bigger engine in a car, if you see what I mean, but it's not going to replace an individual. We see development in the creative aspect of things. And there's lots going on in France in particular with copyright and singers and so on. But is it really creativity? Just statistics, complex statistics, but statistics. No, it's not going to replace us yet, but it's a philosophical question, and there's never a frank yes or no on that one. So let's watch this space.
Okay.
Yes, Emmanuel, you said you had questions as well?
Yes, I'll rush through quickly since our time is up. So we have one question from Tom O'Neill, and he is asking, you guys have done well. And then, especially Matt, he said, I'm based in research group at Uni of York, looking at AI safety. I'm fascinated by how you are gathering your version of ChatGPT. I remember as a child, it was a rite of passage of sorts to circumvent security controls on IT systems, which I'm sure are more rigorous now. But kids get pretty creative at this stuff. How effective do you find your approach to guardrails? And he's asking if Martin can connect offline. So that's one question we have. And the rest are more or less thanking you for the good job you two have done. So they're all happy there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Martin, are you online to answer this question?
Well, yeah, I'm still here. I mean, how effective are our guardrails? Well, it is like shifting sands, and doing anything in a school. Tom is absolutely right. I mean, all of our students, the first thing we want to do is to try and get around anything that we put in place, which is how it then leads back to what I started with, where we talk about education is key rather than restriction. So we engage with students. I mean, something I didn't mention, we have a student voice group called the Student Council, and we work with them, and they sort of disseminate information to the wider student body, and it is also a conduit from them back to us. And it is a constant challenge, and I'm not saying that what we're doing is a panacea to solve all of those problems. What it is just sort of part of our approach. And students, whether they're at school or university, if you put something in their way and that's stopping them getting to something that they see as something they need, then it's going to be sort of a very sort of full-time cybersecurity team that is going to stop them from doing that. So because some of them are quite determined, but I think it's more of having a broad approach where we try and educate them. We explain through the student council of why we are doing things. We talk to them about the fact that as a school, we have a statutory duty under keeping children safe in education, that we have to put some barriers in the way. But it is a challenge. So I'm not saying that what we're doing is the only way of doing things and the right way of doing things. We're just sort of trying to approach it in a pragmatic way and drawing in information. So engaging with people like Pierre, engaging with our very able parent advisory group, and also talking to our students, many of whom are really quite sort of sensible and understand why we're doing these things. So it's sort of a multi-pronged approach, really. I'm not sure I've really answered the question, but just sort of explaining things a bit.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, I know our time is up, but I have this question I want to ask quickly, maybe one or two. You know, in your presentation, Martin, you said you have mitigating strategy, and the first one was AI-free policy. So if you are using AI-free policy, how are you policing it to find out whether the students use AI or not? Assuming you're giving them work and they use AI, how are you able to detect it? in your
Yeah, so-
AI-free policy?
Yeah, I mean, our AI-free approach is very much when we have written assessments, and those written assessments are done under supervised conditions and no computers present. So we're effectively taking the technological access away from our students, because they still have to be able to write an answer with a pen on a piece of paper, because when they get their GCSE or A-level exams, that's how they're being assessed. Until the exam boards decide to change to digital assessments, we are still aiming for that end goal of written papers at the end of their GCSE or A-level time with us. So AI-free is pretty much assessments in class, teacher supervising them, and it's quite easy to manage that. It would be very hard to manage it if you said, go away and do this, and this is AI-free. It would be a very strong student that would say, yes, I'm going to do that, and not actually go and do these things. So yeah, AI-free is very much a thing that happens in class under supervision.
Okay, thank you so much.